This is a song, and we actually chose this specifically because we knew we could sing it a cappella. So let us sing, "Oh Little Town of Bethlehem." Who wants to start that? Holy child.
He sent to us, we pray, cast out our sin and victory, be born in us today. We hear the Christmas angels, the great glad tidings tell. Oh, come to us, abide with us, our Lord Emmanuel.
Thank you. It wouldn't be worship without some hiccups. Today is our third week in our series that we're calling If Only. We're looking at three things that we really want. If only I could have thriving relationships. If only I could be healthier. And today, this is a crucial one. If only I could do something that counts. If only I could do something great. What do you think this means? To do something great. There's a true story about a senator in Washington. And he was having lunch in a restaurant, and the waiter brings over some rolls, but no butter. And so the senator says, "Can you bring me some butter, please?" And the waiter says, "Okay, yeah, I'll be right back." About 10 minutes later, no butter. So the senator gets the waiter's attention and says, "Can you bring me some butter, please?" And the waiter says, "Yeah, I'll be right to it." 10 minutes later, no butter. By now, the senator is getting quite irate, and so he gets the attention of the waiter to the point where everybody in the restaurant can hear it. And he says, "Maybe you don't know who I am. I'm a Princeton grad, a Rhodes Scholar, an All-American basketball player who played with the New York Knicks in the pros, and I'm currently a United States Senator." And then he rattles off, "Chairman of the International Debt Subcommittee of the Senate Finance Committee, Chairman of the Water and Power Subcommittee of the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee, and a member of the Senate Select Intelligence Committee." There's a long pause, and it is silent in the restaurant. And then the waiter looks at the senator and says, "Maybe you don't know who I am. I'm the man with the butter." Was that senator a great man? I don't know, but certainly compared to the man with the butter, what does it mean to have a great life? What does it mean to have a life that really counts? You know, our culture has already defined this for us. It's defined greatness, what I like to call the two F's. Fame and fortune. Some of you probably remember the TV show The Lifestyles of Rich and Famous back in the 80s. Hugely popular because the idea was that we watched these people that we considered great because they were rich, they were famous, they had the two things, the fame and the fortune. Now today, I think if that show came out today, they would have to add another F. We call it the three F's. Fame, fortune, and followers. Today, you are great if you have a lot of followers. For example, Selena Gomez leads Instagram with 127 million followers. Katy Perry leads Twitter with 104 million followers. Now, these are people that they've got fame, they've got fortune, and they certainly have followers. So we're going to play a little game here. I'm going to show you on the screen a picture of two people. And I'm going to see how tuned you in are to Twitter. Which of these two people has more followers? All right, we're going to see a show of hands. So we have Ellen DeGeneres and Oprah. How many of you believe that Ellen has more followers? So it's a few. Okay, how about Oprah? So overwhelming majority. It was 100% at the first service. Here's the results. Ellen has more followers, 73.6 compared to 38.7. Okay, let's try another one. Kim Kardashian and President Barack Obama. How many of you think Kim Kardashian has more? Okay. How about Barack Obama? There's just a few. All right. 95 million compared to 55.7 million. Almost the same results of the hands going up at the first service. Actually, Judge Lipster said he voted for Barack Obama because he didn't even know who Kim Kardashian was. So that just... All right, okay, LeBron James and Jimmy Fallon. LeBron James, raise your hand. Just a few. Jimmy Fallon. Whoops. Jimmy Fallon. It's about... Okay, Jimmy Fallon over LeBron James. All right, let's try one more. Bill Gates and One Direction. Raise your hand if you don't even know who One Direction is. Okay. One Direction's a band, teenagers know. Okay, which one do you think? Bill Gates has more followers? A few. One Direction. One Direction has a lot more. All right, 32 versus 30. Now, I know we're all kind of sitting here thinking, now we know that we don't define greatness by the number of followers we have on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, at least I don't. I define greatness by the ability to change the world or make a difference. What is interesting is a lot of companies are actually putting this into their slogans, their mission statement. When I was working at the credit union, we were actually looking at changing our slogan, and I came across one example of a credit union that really stood out at me. It said, making a difference one member at a time. I don't think that would work for a plumber. Making a difference one toilet at a time. Unless your toilet was plugged, maybe so. But what's interesting is Jesus offers us a completely different way to measure greatness, a way to define it. And so I'm going to ask Chris to read the first verse of our passage today.
Matthew 18:1. At that time, the disciples came to Jesus and asked, "Who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?"
Okay. You know, the disciples are just like us. They want to know what's great, and this has not changed for millennia. And you know that each disciple is thinking, it's me. It's got to be me. I mean, Peter is thinking, hey, I walked on water. It's got to be me. I'm the greatest. John is thinking, Jesus really loves me. It's got to be me. Bartholomew was thinking, it's got to be me. I mean, many years from now, they're going to be playing Bible trivia and no one's going to remember my name. So it's got to be me. Even the parents of the disciples get involved in this. A few chapters later, look what we have. Then the mother of the sons of Zebedee came to him with her sons, and kneeling before him, she asked a favor of him. And he said to her, what do you want? She said to him, declare that these two sons of mine will sit, one at your right hand and one at your left in your kingdom. This mom is saying, forget about Peter, forget about John, certainly forget about Bartholomew, I mean everyone else does. Just remember my sons. Now when it comes to where we sit today, it really doesn't make a difference. In fact, just trying to get everybody to come to the table at one time is the chore. But the custom at the time was where you sat was really important. You always started out with the guest of honor, or the big cheese. They sat down first, and then the person at the right, the person left, person on the right, person left. That was the custom. And this mom is just thinking, if I can just get my sons to sit right next to Jesus, then they would truly be great. And maybe she's even thinking about her own greatness as well. But Jesus' response is so radical, so different. Great people do great things. Now, in our society, greatness is defined by the career that we have chosen. When I was pastoring up in Chadron, I had many conversations with college students, and they were always asking me, you know, what major should I take that's going to get me into that career that's going to make me great? Or what can I do to kind of help me with the two F's, fame and fortune? And they're maybe thinking followers. Now, I'm going to ask you to do something. And to do this, I need all of you to have a writing utensil. So go ahead and find a pen, a pencil, something that you can write with. And very important. And so find something to write down. And I want you to answer this question. At the end of your life, what are the 2 or 3 qualities you want to be remembered for? What are the 2 or 3 qualities that you want to be remembered for? And as you're working on this list, I'm going to tell you a story. Some of you know I got a new car this year. It's the exact same color as Sue's and Myron's, which has already created some confusion. Anyway, I sold my '02 Honda Odyssey to my cousin. I bought my parents' '05 Toyota Sienna. Now you might be thinking, well, that's not much of an upgrade, but let me tell you, that car sat in my parents' garage for a long time, only had 47,000 miles on it, just needed new tires. So I think I came up ahead on that van. But just in those 3 years, I noticed a huge upgrade in the bells and whistles. For example, my van has this gauge that tells me how many miles per gallon I'm getting. And so all I have to do is just put my foot to the pedal, and guess what? I get to watch that gauge go down and down and down. So what that gauge is actually telling me is I need to do something great. And it's a reminder to be a better driver, a smarter driver, perhaps slow down, do some coasting, put on the cruise control. And of course, see how many miles per gallon I can get out of a gallon of gas. I thought about Jesus. Jesus has just changed the gauge for us. Jesus has changed the gauge about greatness, about living a life that counts. If you're going to have a great life, the first quality requires humility. Did anyone put that on the list? Why don't you go ahead and read the rest of the passage for us, Chris?
Matthew 18:2-4. He called a child whom he put among them and said, "Truly I tell you, unless you change and become like children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Whoever becomes humble, like this child, is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven."
Pretty sure Peter, James, John, and Bartholomew are quite offended by now. Kids had no place in first century life. They were deemed as not important, and Jesus has just used a child as an example to represent humbleness. So what does it mean to be humble? To truly be humble? Well, it means we must turn away from our sins. If you're living a life right now that is nurturing sin, somehow you must turn away and turn towards the cross. And as Jesus says, become like a child. It's not about the 3 F's anymore. It's about humility. If you want to be great, be humble. The past few years I've attended a wonderful continuing education event that's held right here at the Civic Center. It's called the Global Leadership Conference. I highly recommend it for anyone that's interested in leadership. Last year we had a speaker. One of the presenters was a man by the name of Alan Malawi. He was the CEO of Ford for about 8 years, was right there at the midst of the '04 financial crisis and really turned around the company. But what I remember about Alan was that he was just filled with humility. He came from Boeing, where he made airplanes, and so he was asked to go to Ford to get them out of a $17 billion deficit. Now, as you might imagine, he was quite reluctant. He was thinking to himself, what do I know about the auto industry? What do I know about cars? But he decides to take up the challenge. And so on the first day of the job, he flies into Detroit. He's picked up at the airport and driven to Ford headquarters in the Land Rover. He's taken into an underground parking garage only for upper-level management. And he's looking around at all these cars owned by Ford execs. Not one is a Ford. And he's thinking, and he says, note to self, this is a problem. And then he makes a speech to some employees. And then he's ushered into a room full of reporters. Now, these are reporters that follow the auto industry on a daily basis. And there's one reporter that tries to humiliate him by asking, you've been making airplanes your whole life. How are you going to turn around a company with a $17 billion deficit? You know nothing about cars. Don't you know that every car has 4,000 parts? And Alan's thinking, wow, this is the first question. But without batting an eye, he says, every plane at Boeing has 4 million parts, and they fly. Humility is not humiliation. I think we all have those moments of humiliation in our lives. It sits in our memories, and it's painful. For me, I can picture exactly where I was. I can picture who was around the room. I know exactly how I felt. Now, when I Go back to that moment of humiliation. I don't quite remember what was said. I think it was maybe my mind's way of kind of protecting me from a very painful moment. That was not a humbling experience. That was humiliation. Humility came several months later. A moment, an opportunity came to me where I could respond to that event. And when I didn't, a man that I knew and respected said to me, "Seth, you are a person of integrity." That was humbling. Humility is not humiliation. Rick Warren once said, "Humility is not thinking less of yourself, it is thinking of yourself less." We live in a weird world where we struggle with pride and humility, trying to find the right balance. I can prove this by one word: selfie. A few years back, it wasn't even the dictionary, but even if you've never taken a selfie of yourself, you know exactly what that word means. It is everywhere now. And in fact, it's been around for a long time. I've even found the earliest picture taken in the early 1900s, I think, of the first selfie. Some of you are probably thinking, why isn't he making duck lips in there? I don't know. But here's the thing about selfies. If it's in a group, who's the first person you look at? Yourself. And I can prove this about how important selfies are. If the other people in the group are doing something weird, if someone is picking their nose and you look really good in that selfie, you're going to post that to social media. We struggle with this. When you do things, do not let selfishness or pride be your guide. Instead, be humble and give more honor to others than to yourselves. Do not be interested only in your own life, but be interested in the lives of others. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. I get this, but this doesn't tell me how. How do I become more humble? How do I get from here to there? Let me throw a couple things out that you can jot down. One, ask questions when you meet other people. And I'm not talking about prying, but show someone that you really care about them. Two, get outside yourself. Ask yourself, how can I bring more joy to someone else? How can I be generous? And three, pray for humility. Now you might be thinking to yourself, this is all good and it works really well in the church, but you're not talking about the real world. Now remember, I used to sit right where you are. And I used to notice that in the real world, out there, what got you ahead was pride. Pride in your work. It's what got you ahead of everybody else because that's what is more important. But as one who has sat right where you are, I can tell you that if you want a life that really counts, if you want your life to be a channel for God, we need to move away from pride because pride will block that Spirit of God every time. When you're prideful, you are not open to change, and when you're prideful, you are certainly not willing to improve. But great people always improve. Now on to number two, servanthood. Anyone put that down? The great people on earth are not too prideful to serve other people. Remember that passage in Matthew where that mom steps in? Well, listen to the response of what happens next. But it should not be that way among you. Whoever wants to become great among you must serve the rest of you like a servant. Whoever wants to become first among you must serve the rest of you like a slave. In the same way, the Son of Man did not come to be served. He came to serve others and to give his life as a ransom for many people. Servanthood is the towel that Jesus wore when he was washing other people's feet. Servanthood happens when there is no notoriety, no press, no one knows what you're doing. And I know that the church falls into this. We want to do the big splash. And I even had this idea when I was watching all the people that were doing the flood buckets. And I was thinking, here's a big thing that we can do for the church. Let's get on the sidewalks of 10th Street. And we just line up all of the items that go into a flood bucket. And we just have all these people that line up. We have someone holds up the sign that says, honk for Jesus. And it would get all kinds of press. And everyone on 10th Street would see it. Because make sure we do it at rush hour so when everyone's driving by. And when you think about it, that's missions doing the big splash. And we kind of do that in our own individual lives. We like the big splash. It kind of helps us with our fame and our fortune and maybe even our followers. But the truth is that servanthood is more like the cup. It's the cup of water where Jesus says we serve. Those who give one of these little ones a cup of cold water, because they are my followers, will truly get their reward. Servanthood is about showing up week after week after week to be an usher. The cup is about signing up to help out with our children's church or expanded nursery program, because it's not about us, it is about teaching our children about God. Servanthood in the cup is about being a newcomer. I sat right where you are, and I still can remember when Wes and Karen Parrish came up to me, smiled, shook my hand, and said to me, "I'm so glad that you were here." It's those little things that you remember that pays dividends. But it should not be that way among you. Whoever wants to become great among you must serve the rest of you like a servant. Brad Calgion tells the story of attending a Major League Baseball game with some leaders of our denomination. He had the distinction, or maybe the unfortunate opportunity, of sitting right next to a bishop. It was the Bishop of Indiana. His name was Mike Conyer. Now, Brad says that it was a wonderful experience and tells how this bishop told Brad the story. And Brad says it was so vivid that he had to write it down because he wanted to get all the details right. Bishop Conyer told Brad that when he served his first church right out of seminary, there was this woman named Hattie. And Hattie prepared the communion elements for 37 years. For 37 years, she did the same task. But when Mike Conyer served that church, Hattie was getting up there in age, and her family was moving into assisted living. And so Mike being a young pastor, he did what many pastors do. He ran an ad in the bulletin. Ran it for several months, and he got nothing. Nobody volunteered for the job. Well, one day, Mike Conyer was visiting Hattie in the nursing home, and she asked him, "Pastor Mike, did you get someone to take my place to do what I was doing?" "No, Hattie," said Mike. "No one has responded yet. I've been running in the bulletins for 2 or 3 months and nothing. Every time we have communion, I have to call somebody up and just say, can you do it just this one time?" And then Mike looked at Hattie and said, "Hattie, I can't find anybody to do your job." And then Hattie took Mike Conyer's hands and said, "Oh, Pastor Mike, it was never a job to me. That was my ministry. Every time I prepared the juice and bread, I prayed with my eyes wide open for our church. I prayed for every family in the church I could remember by name. I prayed for your preaching. I prayed that the grace of Jesus would just transform people. I prayed for people who were hurt, beat up by life, who were sick. Then when I cleaned it all up, I just imagined Jesus putting a towel around his waist and washing the disciples' feet. And I prayed that Jesus would clean out any selfish habit in people's lives. I prayed for harmful attitudes in the church, that they would be forgiven, that people would be set free from them. It was never a job for me, Pastor Mike. It was a ministry." Mike then asked Hattie if she wouldn't mind if he just would write that story up for the newsletter. Hattie says, "Well, I guess so, but I don't see how that's going to do anything." So Mike did just that. And a couple days later, he had a waiting list of people wanting to prepare communion. What could you do to live a life that counts? Not what the church can do, but what can you do? You know, we have a group in this church, unsung heroes, called the Helping Hands. They do big splash things like building a fence. But they also do cup things like just changing a light bulb. We have one volunteer in this church who comes around to the office about the same time and restocks our food pantry. We have Sunday school teachers who have taught 20, 25, 30 plus years of Sunday school. That's at least 2 generations of people. We have a parishioner who, after reading about the destruction in and around Houston after Hurricane Harvey, told a few friends and family members they needed to do something. So he rounded up a trailer, made some connections down south, loaded it up, and headed for Texas. I didn't even know about anything about it until I saw the results on Facebook. No big splash, just the cup to do something that counts. What could you do? Maybe it's not the giant thing. Maybe it's just something as simple as this. You know, my guess Hattie didn't have a lot of money. I don't know. She certainly didn't have any fame outside that church. And she certainly didn't have any followers except those who knew her well. But I'd say that she was great. I would say that she lived a life that counted. Do you want to be great? Do you want to live a life that counts? If only.